to another dimension, surpassing the vastness of time and space. The Grand Thoughtmaturgist is here.
Hang on, what are we doing today, Slurb? Oh yeah, I'll get you. Alright, Earthlings. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed to our little channel. It's lovely to have you on board. A welcome one, a welcome all. So in this video, we're going to take a little gander at the use of foreshadowing in your role-playing adventures, or as I like to call them, warning signs. So have a look at this, mate. Over in your dimension, you'll find plenty of examples of the use of foreshadowing in your storytelling mediums, whether that be in books, films, computer games, TV series, and it's there to give subtle and not so subtle hints and clues as to what may yet come later in that tale. Now, a role-playing game, it ain't much different, and you can use foreshadowing and warning signs in your games to warn your party, whether subtly or not so subtly, of what might be coming later on in your adventure. But why even bother? Personally, I like to add a liberal splash of foreshadowing to keep my players informed, because with enough information, players of role-playing games can make more informed decisions and choices, and with warnings of what might be round that next corner, can make more calculated risks and judgments. I mentioned in another video, role-playing games ain't about the GM versus the players, or vice versa. It's a group experience, and together you make the game what it is. So by supplying enough information to your group will only help them on their journey. I suppose the only caveat is with mystery games and investigations, but even then there should be relevant clues and hints so that your players have at least a fighting chance of resolving that investigation. So, where can you start to employ foreshadowing in your adventures? Personally, I would recommend using foreshadowing at the very beginning if possible. So right at the point of your party being offered the adventure, whether that be from within some kind of action itself or from a benefactor asking the group to assist them. For example, witnesses may well have seen the bailiff's daughter being dragged towards the Troll Marshes. The name alone of that place, opening up the opportunity for your player characters to inquire about the Troll Marshes, perhaps gaining information regarding trolls themselves, and being able to prepare for the event that they may come across such beings, and that information itself may well inform them that trolls are a foe to be avoided. Handing out jobs and tasks from NPCs is an opportunity for your party to ask questions and try and gain a little more knowledge ahead of their adventure. I would always encourage players to ask plenty of questions if they have the chance. That way, they might be able to reveal what kind of stuff they need to put together for their adventure. Those intrepid adventurers keen to rescue the bailiff's daughter may well find out that in the Troll Marshes there are also dark caves and caverns, and that the village itself has also been raided recently by goblins who emerged from the Troll Marshes. So those players may well then start to surmise that these instances may be connected. Perhaps the bailiff's daughter has been taken to one of these cave systems. Perhaps they may have to face goblins, and the player characters know to prepare for potential cave delving. Have they got some sort of dark vision? Will they need to pick up torches? How about rope? Who knows? But just from these little clues, the GM is able to foreshadow potential dangers that may occur later in the adventure. Any line of inquiry from a group of players may well discover more information about each job. I personally like to give as many hints as possible in the answers that those quest givers or NPCs provide. There are plenty of ways to add further clues and foreshadowing. Perhaps your party might come across a diary written by a previous adventurer which hints at strange encounters with some horrible creature, or simply their notes on their research before they went to that location. Rumours that they'd heard of traps or maybe potential solutions to riddles. Notes are a pretty handy way of introducing a little bit more depth and drama, and so utilising notes to splash a bit of foreshadowing can be handy for both you and your players. Another useful tool to introduce foreshadowing can be the use of NPCs, either those the party meets or those travelling with the party on adventures. It can be a bit of a trope for the resident NPC to insert plenty of exposition, but it's well worth using, even if just to remind the players of foreshadowing you'd included earlier in the adventure. You could even use smell to foreshadow approaching enemies. Repugnantly pungent foes, such as the decaying corpses of zombies or those horrible stinky troglodytes, may well be smelt long before they are actually seen. Smell can also warn of other hazards ahead, such as the scent of smoke, fumes or explosive gases. Maybe their scanning systems pick up movement, and maybe it's lots of movement. Also, as your party moves about, they could hear strange noises. Strange noises coming nearer. If it's some kind of horrible creature, you can add some kind of roaring or animal noise that seems to be getting closer and closer, like something is hunting the player characters. I'd also sprinkle a fair old amount of foreshadowing whenever there's danger ahead. I mentioned before in my video on traps that it's worth giving your party plenty of hints that there's some horrible contraption coming up. Hopefully, if you've added enough foreshadowing and hints, by the time your party actually comes across the trap, they'll be looking for it and won't stumble into it. For other situations, introduce the possibility to insert some foreshadowing for your group. Maybe on the approach to your adventure location, they find some unusual remains, perhaps of a meal. Maybe they discover a vehicle with huge rents in its side. Rents, maybe, that have been made by some kind of claw. Perhaps as they're walking through this quiet section of town, they find empty bullet casings and bloodstains. Or maybe they find some peculiar residue at the scene of the crime. These little clues and foreshadowings may help prepare your party for any imminent danger ahead, or at least suggest that they should become a little more cautious. If your foreshadowing and hints have been focused on preparing the group to face something far more terrible than they're really ready to face, then the final stage of a foreshadowing is to show the creature or creatures and display their power. Has it got some weird and wonderful ability that the players may not have seen before? These too could have been foreshadowed to some extent. If your player characters are negotiating a derelict spacecraft and they've seen strange warping and bending of metal as they've made their way around, together with huge claw rends, and the fact that each of the victims they've found so far has had their head exploded, then hopefully it'll go some way as to warn the party that they might not want to stay around when this thing appears. If it's got the ability to bend metal, explode heads and rend through ship hulls, it might not be worth trying to have a chat with it. This kind of foreshadowing may well encourage your party to potentially think more strategically when it comes to fights. If you've been hinting that there's dozens of enemies down in this cavern, then they might not want to try and face said enemies in a large wide open space, and instead figure out that it would be better to fight, if they plan on fighting, in a confined space where only so many weapons can come to bear. But I suppose that's kind of teetering on tactical forethought, and not every player will really want to be thinking military tactics. But as long as you've given enough warning that there are plenty of things to face, and it is a danger for your party, then at least they might think twice of facing everything at once. But ultimately, using foreshadowing and suggestions is only going to benefit your party in their adventure. The more information that you can provide them during their journey, the better informed they are when the climax of said journey comes to pass. As time goes by, your players will probably become more and more familiar with A, the way you run the game, and B, potentially what different critters and monsters can do, and they may well learn and discover or hear about things that they definitely need to run from. But until that point, especially if your party is very new, I would make it very clear on what dangers may well face their group. As I've said before, it's not really about games masters versus players. It's much more fun to set up your players for a situation that they're well informed for, and hopefully will surprise you with their numerous different options. The more clues, foreshadowing and options you can give your party will in the end encourage a more creative and exciting experience for everyone. In my experience, I found it much more entertaining and enjoyable when players learn to think outside the box, eventually facing some horrible creature that they suspect is far outclassing them. It's joyful to see them lure that creature back into a tighter space or use some imaginative tools to trap the thing long enough for them to get away, which has got to be far more fun than watching a party run in blindly and be torn asunder by something that outclasses them. I'm a strong believer that you should introduce aspects to the game that outclasses the level or abilities of your characters. I do believe that characters should retreat on occasion. Without such challenges, I fear that games can become stale and stagnant, where every battle is a clear victory for the party and the risk and dangers involved in close quarters combat or deadly firefights is overlooked, as every previous battle has been a cakewalk. Though in the spirit of foreshadowing and warning shots, I would suggest that when you first assemble your party, it is made clear and reiterated occasionally that not everything they face will be a walk in the park. If you've given them personal GM to player foreshadowing that there could be things that outclass their characters, additional in-game foreshadowing will only help them as their characters progress. No, I think it's a good idea to continue to challenge your party, and sometimes with impossible odds, because sometimes survival itself is a reward that can spur your party to tell tales of such survival for many years to come. And remember that victories against seemingly impossible odds are the seeds for songs of legend. So I say give it a go. So, do you employ foreshadowing in your games? Do you ever outclass your player characters on occasion? Or do you think anything outside of a balanced encounter is absolute bonkers? Let me know in the comments, and we'll have a chat. Thank you very much for listening. Slap the subscribe, chuck a like, click the bell, and I'll catch you with the next one. Good hunting.